for this meeting. Okay, my name is Heidi and I'm the staff specialist working on the Air District school bus programs. Today I will be covering the funding, eligibility, and the application process for electric school buses and supporting infrastructure. Before we get started, I will pass it over to Cynthia, an assistant staff specialist with the Air District's on-road team. She will provide some information on how to participate in today's webinar. Cynthia?
Hi everyone. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items so you will know how to participate today's webinar. Here's a screenshot of the Zoom interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop at the bottom of your screen. You are listening in using your computer speaker by default. If you would prefer to join by phone, select the up arrow to the right of your microphone button, which will pop up the menu. Select the switch to phone option and enter in the dial-in information in your invite email to join by phone. Please be aware that you will not be able to unmute, use your video, or share your screen during today's presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded. You can find a copy of today's presentation and additional resources for you to download on our website. The webinar's recording will be posted on our website in a few days. You can also email us at grants@baaqmd.gov for copies as well. Lastly, you will have the opportunity to submit the questions using the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will answer the questions during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We will only be able to answer questions during the webinar received through the Q&A function and will not be taking any live audio questions or calling on anyone who has a raised hand. Any questions that are not answered during the webinar can be emailed to the grants@baaqmd.gov and we will follow up separately. Now I will pass it back to Heidi to begin the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. In today's webinar, we will go over the school bus grant program, including the associated requirements, eligibility, and award amounts. In addition, we will provide an overview of our infrastructure funding opportunities and general requirements. Next, we will dive into the project process. And lastly, we will have time to answer questions that have been submitted through the Q&A function. This presentation portion should take about 30 minutes. Next slide, please. Okay, before jumping into the details, I want to ensure that everyone is aware that this presentation will only be covering school bus and supporting infrastructure grant funding opportunities. The Air District is funding many types of projects, such as off-road tractors and transit buses during this funding cycle, but information on these projects will not be covered in this presentation. In addition, we will not be offering infrastructure-only funding during this current funding cycle. Any infrastructure application submitted must also include a request for funding to replace school buses. With that, I'll go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. Okay. The Air District is currently accepting applications for zero-emission electric school bus projects and associated infrastructure. Our primary objective here is to support schools in replacing their older high-emission diesel or alternative fuel buses with new zero-emission electric buses. This not only includes the buses themselves, but also the supporting infrastructure, ensuring they have the necessary charging facilities. These projects are intended to reduce air pollution from school buses, which in turn improves the Bay Area's air quality and air quality for children who ride the buses we fund. This funding cycle, the Air District has $80 million available to award to eligible projects. The Air District uses several different funding programs to fund school buses. This includes the Carl Moyer Program, the Transportation Fund for Clean Air, and the Community Health Protection Program. Applicants submit just one application in our online portal, and then staff assess eligibility for funding under each of these programs. So we will determine which program is best for your needs and how to best maximize your funding. Funding is available on a first-come, first-served basis until all funds have been allocated. Projects must operate within a priority community to be eligible for funding. More details on this requirement will be discussed later. However, please note most, if not all, school buses in the Bay Area do operate in an Air District priority community. There are many other non-Air District funding opportunities for school buses. I will not go into detail during this presentation on those funding opportunities, but the Air District does encourage everyone to explore all opportunities available. And in many cases, you can stack Air District funds with other funding sources in order to maximize your total grant funding. If you have questions about a specific non-Air District program, feel free to reach out to me before submitting your application. Okay, next slide. Now we will look at the basic eligibility requirements for electric school bus replacement projects, beginning with eligible applicants. Eligible school buses must transport public school students to and from public school or for school-sponsored activities, all within the Air District's boundaries. Okay, so who is an eligible applicant? First off, Bay Area public school districts and public charter schools that own their own buses are eligible. In addition, a joint power authority would also be considered an eligible applicant if it is formed by several public schools and the joint power authority holds ownership of the school buses. And lastly, private transportation companies that provide services under contract to Bay Area public school districts, public charter schools, and county offices of education are also eligible. Nonprofit agencies, private schools, and other private companies are unfortunately not eligible for funding. Okay, next slide. Now we will go over some eligibility requirements of the baseline vehicles. When we refer to the baseline vehicle, we are talking about the vehicle that is currently being operated and that you intend to scrap in order to receive funding for a new bus. The new bus is what we call the replacement bus. Okay, this baseline bus must have a gross vehicle weight rating of 14,001 pounds or greater, and it must be fueled by diesel, natural gas, or liquid propane gas. The Air District also requires that the baseline vehicle has been insured and registered with the DMV at the time of application submittal and the 24 previous months prior to application submittal. In addition, each baseline vehicle should have a current California Highway Patrol Form 292 during the time of application submittal. There are also several ownership requirements for the baseline vehicle to be eligible. The applicant must be the sole owner of the vehicle, which should be documented through a vehicle title with no active lien holders. In addition, the applicant must have owned and operated the vehicle for the previous 24 months prior to application submittal. And please note, as part of this program, the baseline bus must be scrapped and destroyed in order to receive funding. This bus dismantling happens once the contract is complete and the replacement buses have arrived and are operational. Okay, next slide. Now we will turn our attention to the replacement school bus requirements. And again, when we say replacement buses, we are referring to the new buses. Like the baseline bus, the replacement bus must also have a gross vehicle weight rating greater than or equal to 14,001 pounds. In addition, the replacement bus must be new and like for like. An example of this would be replacing a bus within the same weight range and similar horsepower range. Previously, the Air District allowed applicants to replace their school buses with alternative fuel buses, such as compressed natural gas or liquid propane gas. However, for this funding cycle, the Air District is only accepting applications for zero-emission electric school buses. Okay, the replacement bus also must be under warranty. So please ensure that warranty documentation is submitted with your application for each replacement vehicle. And lastly, the Air District requires that the replacement vehicle has a California Air Resources Board powertrain executive order. Typically for electric school buses, there will be both a vehicle executive order and a powertrain executive order. Please ensure that the executive order you submit is the powertrain executive order. The equipment vendor that you purchase your bus through can usually assist in obtaining the correct executive order for your replacement bus. Okay, next slide. All right, now we'll go over some of the general requirements of our program. Let's start with operating location requirements. The project must operate within the Air District's jurisdiction, which covers the 9 Bay Area counties, excluding some portions of Sonoma County and Solano County. And then for this school bus funding cycle, the Air District is only providing funding for projects that operate in low-income, disadvantaged, or AB 617 communities. The school buses must be domiciled in or have at least one stop in the fleet's route located within one of these areas to be considered eligible. If you are unsure if your fleet operates in a priority community, then please reach out to the Air District and we can provide guidance. Okay, next slide. All right, this slide shows 2 maps. The first one on the left shows the Air District's boundaries, and the map on the right shows the Bay Area's disadvantaged and low-income communities. I have provided links to both maps on this slide so that you can reference them once this webinar has been posted to the Air District's website. I'll also put the links in the chat in case you would like to save them to reference when completing your application. Okay, next slide. The Air District also requires that applicants submit usage documentation for their project. Usage documentation must be submitted for each unit in the application and should be in the form of in-house inspection records, mileage logbooks, maintenance records, CHP inspection records, or fleet tracking software logs. Unfortunately, the Air District does not accept fuel usage records. And usage documentation must include 2 12-month periods from the previous 30 months prior to application submittal. Okay, next slide. So as an example, if an applicant were to apply today, acceptable usage documentation could include any 2 12-month periods between March 22nd, 2022 and now. When you submit the usage records, you need to include an odometer reading and the date the odometer reading was taken. Okay. Applicants with diesel buses must provide their trucker's report showing their fleet is in compliance with the California Air Resources Board's truck and bus regulation. If you are unsure if you're in compliance with the regulations, please reach out to the California Air Resources Board email or phone listed on the slide. Unfortunately, the Air District cannot help with any compliance-related questions. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we're going to talk about the funding. Grants can fund up to 100% of eligible costs associated with both school buses and supporting infrastructure. The Air District is not currently accepting infrastructure-only projects. So if you are applying for infrastructure, your application must also include school bus replacements. The Air District funds both Level 2 and DC fast chargers. For a list of eligible costs, please visit the websites listed on this slide. Okay, next slide. For infrastructure, it's important to line up an itemized quote and warranty information before application. There are also some main requirements that must be met to be considered eligible for funding. First off, the Air District requires that the applicant either own the land that the infrastructure will be constructed on or control it through a long-term lease agreement. The land must be owned or leased for the full project life of the infrastructure. The Air District will determine the project life during application review, and it can span anywhere from about 3 years to a maximum of 10 years. Okay, if you plan to install battery electric charging equipment, it must be level 2 or higher. And all infrastructure equipment must be new. So this means you can't install refurbished or previously used equipment. And the infrastructure must be permanently installed and located in the Air District's boundaries. Sometimes we get inquiries about portable chargers for school buses, but we cannot fund this type of equipment. Okay, next slide, please. Like I said earlier, I can't go into the details of other funding programs, but I do want to highlight the PG&E EV fleet program. Most school bus infrastructure projects that are funded by the Air District take advantage of this co-funding opportunity. The program offers infrastructure incentive and charger rebates to offset the cost of electrifying a fleet. If you plan to apply for infrastructure funding, I suggest reaching out to our contact, Tim O'Neill, with PG&E. I've provided his contact information on this slide, and we'll send it in the Zoom chat. Okay. Now, I just want to run through a couple examples of funding that we've provided in the past. So starting with school buses, this school replaced 10 diesel buses with 10 electric buses. Looking at the first row, they had 6 Type A diesel buses, all with 1999 model year engines. They were replaced with 6 new Type A electric buses. The average annual mileage per bus was 3,375 miles. They had already secured 175,000 per bus through the Federal Diesel Emissions Reduction Act funding program, and we awarded an additional 90,000 per bus, bringing their total funding to 98% of the cost of each bus. They also replaced 4 Type C diesel buses with 4 Type C new electric buses. The old buses had 1999 to 2002 engine model years with an average annual mileage of 7,900 miles. These buses received the full $393,132 per bus, covering the full cost of the buses. They applied for infrastructure funding to support their 10 new buses and received $215,000, covering 100% of their eligible costs. PG&E also supported their project by upgrading the electricity infrastructure on their end. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. If you're interested in applying, please start by reviewing the school bus page on the Air District's website. I also encourage you to contact me in the early stages, and I can go over your basic eligibility, what size and type of new buses you could purchase, and potential funding amounts. You'll also want to contact school bus dealerships and identify the replacement equipment you want. You'll need to know this information before applying. You should start gathering the required application documents, and When you're ready to apply, please do so through our online system, which you can access through the school bus webpage. Once the application is submitted, we will assess your eligibility under our available programs. Okay, next slide. If you are eligible for grant funding, here's what you can expect from the grant process overall. After grant funding is approved by the Air District's Board of Directors, a pre-inspection of the existing equipment will be conducted by the Air District. This can be a 3 to 4 month process. Once we receive board approval, a contract is drafted and signed by the grantee and the Air District. The Air District then authorizes the grantee in order to order and purchase the new equipment. Please note, and this is really important, you cannot order or purchase replacement equipment or start work on any funded infrastructure until a fully executed contract is in place. Okay, next slide. Once the new equipment has arrived, the district will inspect the new equipment and approve the destruction of the old equipment. Any funded infrastructure will also be inspected. The old equipment must be sent to a dismantler for destruction within 60 days of the applicant taking possession of the new equipment. The dismantler will then destroy the equipment, and the Air District inspects the destroyed equipment and releases it for scrapping. Payment is made at this time, and you'll be required to operate the new equipment in the Bay Area at a similar usage as the original equipment. You'll also need to report your usage annually for the duration of the project term. Okay, next slide. Okay, just to wrap up, the Air District understands that this application process and undertaking any grant projects requires a lot of effort and commitment. We want to express our gratitude to all applicants for their dedication to making a positive impact on the environment and protecting school children from harmful air pollutants. Even though the time children spend in diesel school bus commutes accounts for less than 10% of their day, the commute contributes to 33% of a child's daily exposure to some air pollutants. By participating in our school bus program, you are contributing to a cleaner future. Replacing traditional buses with electric buses significantly reduces harmful pollutants, safeguarding the air we breathe and the well-being of our communities. Okay, next slide. All right, we have many resources on our website for your convenience to help you through this long process. All of these materials are available on the Air District School Bus website. We highly recommend reading through Chapter 4 and Chapter 10 of the Carl Moyer Guidelines, which have been summarized in this webinar. Additionally, we have a program fact sheet for high-level information in case you'd like to share with other school districts or interested parties. We also have a required school bus application checklist, which provides a list of all documents required to be submitted with your application, as well as a description of each document. We highly recommend you review this checklist prior to submitting your application. We also have an online system user guide to help you navigate the online application and project portal. This will help you understand how to upload documentation and fill out the application and reimbursement package. Okay, next slide, please. Lastly, please note that we are here to help along the way. Please review our webpage and resource materials at this website. And if you have any questions that have not been answered, you can reach out to us by email at grants@baaqmd.gov or by phone at 415-749-4994. This concludes the presentation portion of today's webinar. We're going to take a 5-minute break to give you a chance to submit any questions. Thanks, everyone, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, welcome back. We are going to go ahead and answer some questions. I'm going to turn it over to Claire and Ken.
All right. Hello, everyone. We'll get started. We got a few questions, so we'll go ahead and get started on those. It sounds like some of you may be having some issues with the Q&A feature. And if that's the case, go ahead and send your questions in the chat if you're not able to make use of the Q&A feature here. So the first question that we got is, does my school need to be located within a priority area to apply? Claire, do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah, I can answer that one. The school itself doesn't need to be located within a priority area, but you do need to have, the fleet needs to operate somewhat within a DAC, an LIC, or an AB 617 community. And the AB 617 communities are West Oakland, East Oakland, Richmond, San Pablo, or Bayview, Hunters Point, Southeast San Francisco.
All right, thank you, Claire. Next question is, how long does the application process take? So I'll take this one. So after you submit an application, you'll hear back from us within 10 business days with any requests or additional information that we may need. After that, we then prepare the application, conduct a cost effectiveness analysis, and determine the funding amounts for the project. Generally, that can take 3 to 6 months depending on the application submittal. Next question is, can we keep the old bus? Claire, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, so unfortunately, you can't keep the old bus. This is a replacement program. So part of the program is replacing an older bus with the new electric bus. So throughout the process, you'll be able to continue to use the old bus until you receive your new bus, and then after we inspect the new bus, we will provide approval for you to then send your old bus to a dismantler where it will be dismantled and scrapped as part of the program. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Claire. Next question is, are gasoline buses eligible? And I'll take this one. If you're talking about the baseline vehicles that you're looking to replace, gasoline buses are not eligible for replacement at this time. So we're only accepting applications to replace diesel buses or CNG or LNG fueled buses at the moment. Next question we got is, from the funding example presented, are federal funds, can federal funds be stacked with BAA QMD funds? The answer is, in general, yes, federal funds can be stacked with our funding source. However, we do ask that you provide information on the federal funding source that you'll be applying to for us. Sometimes specific programs can have conflicting rules and requirements. So before we give like a specific answer to that funding source, we do want to take a look at the rules and requirements and make sure that there's no conflict between them. But in general, most federal funding sources can be stacked with our funds. And I think that is all of the questions that we've received so far. So we'll give it a couple more minutes to see if any other questions come in or if there's any follow-up questions to the ones that we answered. And we'll be back in a couple minutes.
Okay, well, we did not receive any additional questions, so we'll go ahead and end the webinar for today. But like I mentioned, if you have any questions as you're going through the process, please feel free to reach out to us, phone, email, either one works. And we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks again for your time today. We really appreciate it.